Howdy, folks. I'd like to welcome you all today to What's in Tegan's Storage Locker, the show that dares to ask the question, just what is in my storage locker? The answer today, as most days, is comic books. Specifically, piles and piles and piles of comic books I bought when I was a kid that I maybe didn't take as good a care of as I should have, so I need to go back and put them in bags and organize them and do all that good stuff. And that's what we're doing here for your edification and enjoyment. I plucked a pile of comics out of the box. Last video I did, I only got through like 6 books. Let's see if we can let's try to make better time than that. Roger is, he's perking up now that he knows I mentioned him. Let's see how far we get without interference. All right. Captain America 383, the triple-sized 50th anniversary issue from 1991. They made a big deal out of Captain America's 50th anniversary that year. I think there were a few special projects. Captain America doesn't turn 50 every year. Nice looking cover by Ron Lim with Jim Lee inks. Underrated inker. He didn't, they brought him in to be a stunt inker for, like special occasions. It wasn't worth his time probably to do that much more inking than that, but I always like his stuff when I see it. You can see his style underneath, but he's not, not too obscuring. I still remember, I got this at the store. I got this at the comic shop, you can tell. And I still remember bringing this one home because I liked this book quite a bit. I liked Grunwald's Cap in general, at least the first half of it. The second half, maybe it starts to, there's a point, and I think maybe the point's different for everyone maybe, but you can see maybe he was on the book a bit too long. But, that, like I say, that point probably is different for everyone. Because there are some interesting things even in this last year in the book. They're very dark stories. Stories more or less about, Marvel falling apart. All right, so this was Ron Lim when he was penciling the book with Danny Bellinati inking. And that was a great team. I thought Ron Lim does a good job with inkers who add some texture and depth to his work. And Joseph Rubinstein was another one who we worked with a few times, who I thought really brought out the best because he has really clear storytelling, dynamic, figure work. Pin him with a good inker and he's invincible. And the gimmick here, it's kind of corny. Captain America it meets other famous American myths like Johnny Appleseed, Pecos Bill, all characters that I'm sure you haven't thought of since, 3rd grade. Not really a lot of constituency for these folks nowadays. No one's really come out and tried to do like a grim and gritty Pecos Bill. Basketball cards. John Henry was a steel driving man. Oh, big forest, so there's Paul Bunyan. That's actually kind of cute, just riding on Paul Bunyan's shoulder. And Uncle Sam, not the same Uncle Sam who, although, that would be interesting if this were the same Uncle Sam from Earth X, not Marvel's Earth X, DC's Earth X, or at least it was Earth X before 1985, which was when it was destroyed in the Crisis. Uncle Sam actually gets a couple of nice moments in the Crisis. For those like me who have, Crisis, committed to memory. So he fights Father Time because he doesn't want to be consigned to the dust heap as just another myth. And that's a fun story because it looks like at first this guy's an elder of the universe, and then Captain America comes back to consciousness and turns out to be Hawkeye, but maybe it wasn't Hawkeye. Maybe it was all just a mind game. Happy 50th with the Avengers at the time. And here's a Captain America and Bucky story by DeFalco and Friends. Great team to do basically a Kirby throwback. Finished art by Bob Petreccia. Don't know that name. But he does a pretty good job inking what was clearly intended to be a very, 60s Kirby. The first run of Cap and Tales to Astonish, if you go back and read it, it's 60 stories, continuity implants of Captain America in World War II. I think it was 11 or 11 page long action stories, just Cap in World War II. Interesting, run. And then later on, I think 90 something, he came back to the present day, and that's when you had the first Cosmic Cube storyline. U.S. Agent story, art by Mark Bagley, who was at this point, he wasn't Mark Bagley yet, he was still just, bumming around doing a lot of work for Marvel, because he could do more than one, work more than one monthly book a month. So he ended up picking up a number of odd jobs here and there, like, backups for Captain America when he was, the penciler for New Warriors. Dan Panosian finished art. This was 1991, so this was Dan Panosian pre-Prophet, pre-Image Dan Panosian. So this was sort of digging up literally, loose threads from the first part of Mark Gruenwald's Cap run, which was dealing with U.S. Agent John Walker's rather traumatic backstory, because this character was kind of an a-hole, but he had a reason to be, because the government played a bunch of mind games on him, and his powers sort of made him nuts too. If I recall correctly, that was the Professor Power treatment did things to the people who underwent it. You can sort of tell there's some Panosian line work there. Early Panosian, the Panosian who did Prophet a year later. I think Prophet was one of the earliest non-founding Image books. And, this was Ron Wilson with Fred Fredrickson on inks for Mark Gruenwald's story. This was actually the origin of Crossbones, because his first story was him actually leading a group of people to try and kill the Red Skull. The real Red Skull, because I actually just saw something about this earlier today, because it was the 1950s Red Skull who sent assassins to try and kill the 1940s Red Skull. Long story, you can read about it online. There were multiple Red Skulls. Ron Wilson was maybe the best, without a doubt, the best solo thing artist. There's your letters page, with your statement of ownership. So Cap was still selling pretty well. Total sum of all issues, single issue nearing the filing date, 316,000 copies. So yeah, Captain America was selling pretty well. That's back when, the newsstands were still important enough that it mattered, because a character like Cap sold really well on the newsstands. Certainly better in the newsstands. Consistent seller in the newsstands, more than he ever was on the direct market at the time. What's next in the pile? How about Secret Origins number 15 from June of 1987, starring the Spectre and Deadman. Now, this volume of Secret Origins is an absolutely fantastic book. Highly recommended if you see just about any issue of it. It had good people in it because it was an anthology title. Secret Origins is always an anthology title, but every issue, they got really good people to do characters who sometimes they were associated with, sometimes it was characters who they were creators who were completely out of left field. But this one, Hannigan and Giordano cover, but this Deadman story by Andrew Helfer, who was a DC mainstay in the period, inks by Dick Giordano over Kevin Maguire pencils. And this was 1987, so this would have been right at the height of the popularity of the early popularity of the Justice League International books, which was not certainly the first thing Kevin Maguire ever did, but maybe his biggest, profile work, certainly up to this point. Ad for this Dr. Fate series by James DeMatteis and Keith Giffen. Excellent series. I have this in a storage unit too. What's this an ad for? Oh, an Infinity Inc. and Outsiders crossover. Man, history is a different country, man. Oh, nice looking stuff. Now, if I were the editor and I were getting Kevin Maguire to do a story for my book, I would probably be real awful and get him to do a cheesecake story, but that's just because, I'm a terrible person. I certainly had a good hand for cheesecake. Oh, first of the new adventures of the Batman. So this would have been the big Batman push right after year one with Miller and Mazzucchelli, which is there's an old saw in rock and roll that you don't go on after James Brown. And I think it's kind of like that. If you're the first Batman creative team down the chute after Miller and Mazzucchelli do year one, you're probably going to be having problems there through no fault of your own. Because, Max Allan Collins, good writer. Chris Warner, not a name that rings that much of a bell for me. Nice looking story, Sort of Kevin Maguire doing his best Neil Adams, because, of course, Neil Adams is the character or the creator most associated with the early stories with that character, although Kelly Jones had a very interesting set of Deadman stories in the 90s. T.M. Maple letter. Roy Thomas was the spearhead behind this volume of Secret Origins because, when Crisis came around and they consolidated all of the universes and they gave everyone a new history. Well, the person who they screwed up the most with that was Roy Thomas, because he was the only one who was actually writing ongoing series on Earth 2 at the time. So, of course, the person who it fell to I guess, clean up the mess, the Augean stables of the post-crisis continuity was Roy Thomas, because as much as it inconvenienced him, it was kind of his bailiwick to clear up that stuff in the first place. So he spent, I think, almost the entirety of the 80s at DC. And then at the very end of the 80s, he came back to Marvel, and that's when I first caught up with him, because he picked up Avengers West Coast after John Byrne. And he was actually responsible for cleaning up John Byrne's mess on that title. Here's Michael T. Gilbert, who was most famous for his Mr. Monster character. Interesting art for a DC book in the 80s. Nice looking stuff. Who was inking him here? Oh, inking himself, I guess. And, this is the Spectre's origin story. He's a cop who's locked in a barrel of cement and goes to ye old pearly gates. His, I actually have the archives for his Golden Age material. The Golden Age Spectre are fun stories. If you have the patience to read any Golden Age stuff, his stories are fun, because he was a co-creation of Jerry Siegel, one of the co-creators of Superman, and Bernard Bailey. So, he had a little touch of the divine, so to speak, in terms of Siegel's contribution. And his stories always had, sort of a grisly, horrific edge to them, because it's a God's vengeance against evildoers. Centurions, that didn't go anywhere. Yeah, it was a nice... There was really, you can't miss with anything in the Secret Origins series. Ad for the Mesa Man special, because his own series didn't do that well, but they did their best to try to keep this guy in print with a handful of specials they eked out over the next few years. Nice looking stuff. On the day Jim Corrigan died, the Spectre was born. Oh, American Defense. There's your generic G.I. Joes for you. And you, my friend, get a bag too. How we doing here? Okay, we're still on it. We're still in it to win it. Daredevil 10 from the Marvel Knights run in the very late part of the 90s. I want to say this is the second appearance of Echo, character who is just about to have her own Marvel TV show, actually. Oh, here's a fold out, but it's not a recap. It's just ads. NBA sweepstakes. Still hawking sports cards and TBS on NBA. Part of the Joe Quesada run on Daredevil. He had a couple different writers. The first 8 issues, of course, were famously Kevin Smith and his Guardian Devil saga, which best you can say about it is that it looks very good. I still say, and many other people agree with me, that getting rid of Karen Page was a big mistake. They should have just, they used Krakoa to undo a lot of mistakes made with the X-Men books. They should have just, stuck Karen Page in there. But Karen Page isn't a mutant. Like, oh, she's a mutant. What's her power? Like, I don't know. She could, all her staples were always even. Undoing an injustice there. Oh, watch where you're going, lady. What are you, deaf? Well, as it turns out. yeah, she's a nice character who, she's got a new limited series out with Daredevil with art by Phil Noto. I haven't read it yet. I'm stacking them up in anticipation of them all being done because I like Phil Noto and I like the Echo character. Man, Joe Quesada, he was a good artist. One of the great tragedies of him becoming editor-in-chief at Marvel was just the fact that he did not have time to pencil a comic book regularly anymore, and he sort of, oh man, speaking of CGI eyesores, my goodness. There's one for you. Oh, Joe Quesada, I think that's him doing mixed media. So he sort of stopped developing. And his work still looks good when it shows up. Or is David Mack? I don't think David Mack is doing any of the art here. But it looks like David Mack. It looks sort of like he's picking it up. And he, famously co-created the character. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. Basically, Joe Quesada, you don't get to see monthly comics from him, so he sort of stopped developing as an artist at a certain point, because that's what happens when you stop drawing monthly comic books. You stop changing as an artist. Tale as old as time. I don't really remember this story very well. But I was still buying the book because it was very nice looking. David Mack. I don't know how much. Don't know how much Marvel he ended up doing outside of his association with this character here. Who inked that? Oh, that was, of course, Palmiotti on inks. Quesada and Palmiotti. As good as famous a team as Power Man and Iron Fist. What do we got next here? What do we got next? How about something fun? How about Fantastic Four Annual 23 from 1990. This was one of my very, very favorite storylines when I was a kid, The Days of Future Present, because this was a sequel to the famous Days of Future Past. Now, of course, you could say that Chris Claremont had been writing mini sequels to Days of Future Past for years in Uncanny X-Men, but this was a specific throwback to that story, dealing with the loose end, so to speak, of Franklin Richards coming back from the future. And, Franklin Richards was one of the mutants who was featured in the Days of Future Past storyline. John Byrne cover there. With the new villain for this series, Ahab, who was really sold as being a big deal for the X-Men, and then ended up never appearing in an X-Men comic again until he sort of appeared in Excalibur years later. They introduced a character who would go on to become the person who became Ahab in the future. But at that point, I was like, man, the window for this character being interesting passed a while ago by the time they ended up bringing him back. But this is a gorgeous issue because not only is Walter Simonson writing it, because he was the guy who was on Fantastic Four at the time, but Jackson Guice, inked by G.F. Isherwood. That right there, that is a good combo. Oh, and Greg Capullo on this backup. I'll get to that in a minute. Oh, and if you didn't know it was Jackson Guice, the moment you see a woman looking a bit like Modesty Blasé, there's your giveaway. Oh, yeah, they go back in like the other alternate dimension or something or other. So you get to see Geis sort of drawing a Kirby throwback version of the team on top of the more recent version. Oh, and you see why. There's Franklin Richards, who's messing with the time stream with us. And there's his great love, Rachel Summers. Now, you can definitely, you can say Rachel Summers was the great love of Franklin Richards' life, but Franklin Richards was not the great love of Rachel Summers' life. Most people would say that was Kitty Pryde, but I don't think that, I think in the current continuity, I want to say I'm a little bit behind on the X books, but I think it's her and Betsy Braddock right now. But still, this story goes the storyline goes a great way towards selling their love affair, because they were they grew up in a concentration camp together. So that will probably tend to create a strong bond between people right there. Yeah, so they get together with the X-Men and they realize, oh yeah, there's some weird mutant stuff happening. And here's one of the stories picking up on Fantastic Four 319, the so-called Secret Wars 3, and I could go off on that if I wanted to. I don't want to, but they're picking up here with what Volcana's up to. She's one of the characters who was created in the original Secret Wars series by Dr. Doom. Her and Titania were two normal women who lived in Denver who just happened to be volunteer to work with Dr. Doom on Battleworld. James Brock and Mark McKenna. Mark McKenna, I believe, ended up going on and doing some other stuff. There's nice looking pages. Nice looking pages. And this, I guess this is Moonstone being written back into continuity because she had been, I guess, injured and written out because she's lying paralyzed in a hospital bed. She has to fight Moonstone. Or Moonstone has to fight Volcana. And of course, she later on became more famous for her role on the Thunderbolts as their resident evil psychiatrist, because every team, I guess, needs an evil psychiatrist. And here is picking up directly from Fantastic Four 319 with Greg Capullo, a very young Greg Capullo, Len Kaminsky writing with Larry Malstead on inks. I remember poring over this story when I was a kid because this is all about the power levels of cosmic beings in the Marvel Universe. And man, that you could not get closer to my interests at the time, because it's like, yep, you go going up the ladder, so to speak. You start off with like Mangog, Overmind, Unimind, High Evolutionary, leading into the Stranger. These are like the two. Well, we don't really know what the Stranger's deal was. He is, the High Evolutionary is, of course, the most powerful human being who's ever lived. Wasn't born a mutant, wasn't born that way. He just overclocked his genes until two things happened. He became the most powerful human being who's ever existed. Oh, hello. It's like, well, you talk about the high evolutionary? I want to get in on that jazz. He was just in the movie, which I haven't seen because I'm behind on the Marvel movies. You just want to be involved in everything. But, he's the most powerful human being who's ever lived, but he's also irrevocably insane because of it. Then you get to Eon and the Celestials and the Vigilanti. Most of the cosmic being rounds up. Don't include the Vigilanti in them because they don't have the mystical creatures in them. The evil creatures who, again, aren't usually counted in this bunch. If they did this now, given everything that Ewing and Hickman have done, the Celestials would undoubtedly be much higher in the ranking, so to speak. Death, Lord Chaos, and Lord Master Order were to the point of abstractions where these creatures really only exist as extensions of the universe. Any time that Lord Chaos and Master Order have their own agency is usually a bad thing. The Living Tribunal. And then above it all, you have Galactus and Eternity. And then you get to see, you go around to the very beginning, quarks and atoms. That's kind of, when I was a kid, that was just absolute catnip to me. And still, to this day, about my two favorite things in this world are comic books with cosmic entities and astrophysics. Half of my YouTube history is just, stuff about space and, particle physics. Can't do the math to save my life, but, there you have it. How are we doing on time here? Oh, we still got plenty of time. We're making much better time than the last video I recorded. What's next here? Here's an interesting one. Batman versus the Predator 3, issue 3. As the title would indicate, they did 3 Predator crossovers with Batman. The first one, I want to say, was one of the Kuberts did, I want to say. I wanted to say Lee Weeks, but no, that was Predator and Magnus Robot Fighter. So, at this point, Diminishing Returns had snuck in, but I think it was still a handsome-looking book because it was, Rodolfo DiMaggio with a Chuck Dixon story. And that's very, very nice stuff there. Sort of John Paul Leon-ish. Oh, this was the late 90s before, 98, January 98. So this shipped at the end of 97. So this was before anyone really knew who John Paul Leon was, but it sort of looks like him anyway. Man, this is nice, though. DiMaggio. DiMaggio really isn't a name like I know, but maybe I need to go back and look at him more, because this is a handsome-looking book. Fighting Mr. Freeze, which I guess if you're going to fight a predator, you want the guy who can be cold. I didn't buy I don't buy every Batman spinoff, but I think I showed up for him fighting the and he's got a Predator armor. That's fun. I wonder if they ever did a toy of that. Sort of looks like RoboCop. Oh, there you go. I see you. I see you. He gets out a bazooka. Oh, but it's just throwing beanbags? See now, Batman, that's not going to get you very far against a Predator. Can you believe that they didn't get around to doing Wolverine Predator until like 2023? That's just now coming out. Yeah, nice stuff. If I can dig out the other three of those, maybe I'll reread that one of these days. Come here. I'll give you a bag. There you go. Oh, crap. Ah. Well, you know that. I guess I don't need the cat to knock everything over. There you go. What's next? What's next? Oh, here we go. I got one. Sleepwalker #1. Collector's item, first issue. Marvel's newest superhero, evildoer's worst nightmare. Can't beat it. Stay away from your brother. Roger. So, as I believe I've said many times before, Sleepwalker, excellent book, completely underrated book. 1991. This guy just wasn't what the comics industry wanted in 1991. That's just plain fact of the matter. He was a little bit of a Bronze Age throwback. You know, maybe if this guy had come out in like 1978, he would have found more of a constituency. As it is, you know, this was the rise of the image artists, and, you know, all the cool heroes had pouches and guns. And here was an alien from, you know, the Mindscape. Brett Blevins inking himself, so that's why it looks so good. Sleepwalker was a great character for him because, you know, he's this sort of grotesque alien with, you know, bug eyes and sort of weird lanky limbs. I've always thought that if you were a crook in the Marvel Universe, you know, it's one thing to fight like Spider-Man or Daredevil. You know, they're just dudes in costumes. But if Sleepwalker comes at you in the middle of the night, just this like giant blue alien who can like rearrange matter with his eyes, that is probably terrifying. Rick Sheridan, that was the dude's name, with his main squeeze Alyssa, who, you know, of course, you got Brett Blevins penciling your book. You're going to have some pretty ladies in it. Oh, and a puppy. It's not the worst puppy I've ever seen in a comic book. Someone, you know, in the old days, you'd have, you know, back when people still had fun Twitter accounts, you'd have a Twitter account that was just like weird drawings of dogs or something. Well, there you go. What was I just saying? Oh, and he's having nightmares, and suddenly, Rocketeer. That came out in 91. I would have thought, you know, if you'd put a gun to my head, I would have probably said it came out in 90. I don't remember that movie very well. I've only seen it the one time. See, this is just a really handsome looking book. And the original dynamic, and it only lasted a couple of issues before he figured out what was going on. But basically, the Sleepwalker guy, the gimmick is that he comes out, he's trapped in his head, and he only comes out when Rick is asleep. And soon they have a rapprochement, and they get to know each other, and Rick, you know, realizes, oh, well, maybe if I keep more regular sleeping habits, this guy can come out and fight evil. But in the very beginning, before he knows who Sleepwalker is, he's just absolutely paranoid because there's just this monster who appears to be coming out of his nightmares to affect the world, you know, to terrorize people in the real world. So he starts going without sleep, gets exhausted. His relationships and his grades start to suffer. But when he falls asleep, Sleepwalker walks the world. Bullpen bullets. Oh, here is the April Fool's bullpen bulletin. So it's all just a bunch of, not a bunch, but sort of fakey news, like, Tom DeFalco shaving his head, or printing an issue of the Toxic Avenger with toxic waste. The Marvel editor. Our newest title, Ex-Punisher. Well, they haven't actually got around to publishing a Punisher X book, but man, not through lack of trying. 50 years of Captain America and other heroes. That's just like Captain America and some other people. Captain America and people who owe him money. The NBA is jamming on Game Boy. And you, because you're a collector's item, first issue, you get a board. Oh man, not that I expect Sleepwalker to be in an age when just about everything has been reprinted. I still don't think Sleepwalker has been reprinted because people are afraid of good comics. I don't know how else to say it than that. People just are afraid of good comics. Oh, well, here's one for you. Another Batman. 551. Now, this is from one of my very, very, very favorite Batman runs of all time. The Mensch Jones Beatty run. Kelly Jones, well, first of all, everything Kelly Jones does. I think I already mentioned him because he did that run on Deadman. But his run on Batman, he gave Batman these absurdly long ears. And to this day, I think the shorter Batman's ears get, I want them to be longer. I want these huge, goofy things here. When I see, Frank Miller drawing Batman with those tiny little stubby ears, I think just like, oh man, you just need to go back to the ear store. And so we got Kelly Jones doing a Ragman team up. And, they're fighting neo-Nazis. That makes sense. For Ragman. That's sort of Ragman's whole deal. Because he hangs around. Ragman is a very prominent Jewish hero, so that's kind of a big deal for him. Oh, creepy Ragman. Defender of the weak and oppressed, punisher of evil. He's a character who's probably never really had the breakout run because he had a run in the late 70s. That's when he first premiered with, I think, Joe Kubert. And then he had a run in the early 90s. But he'd never really been as prominent as he probably could be, considering he's got a great visual, this cloak and just these different colored rags. Artists could probably really have a lot of fun with him, but he's just always just short that one superstar run to push him into the next level as a character. Oh wow, and we're really just talking about just conversation about anti-Semitism. Strangely, sadly, depressingly still relevant. But that's Ragman's whole deal, is he goes after anti-Semites, as well he should. Oh, but just gorgeous, gorgeous. I could, like I say, this is one of my favorite Batman runs. And, the run was, a lot of the stories sort of had a mystical bent to them because they figured out, like, oh, Kelly Jones, he's really good at drawing spooky stuff, so we'll sort of do some, Batman stories that touch on the spookier side, because they did a run, or they did a story with Etrigan and the Demon. They did one with the Spectre. This was also, I think, the run that they did that. They revamped Mr. Freeze, sort of brought him more in line with his animated series. Of course, his Bruce, the one thing you can say about Kelly Jones is his Bruce Wayne sort of looked like he just got rolled. Like he was just walking through the alley and he lost his wallet. A bit rumpled there. Yeah, so if you see any of the Kelly Jones Batman, definitely highly, highly, highly recommended. Could not recommend higher, actually. I'm, someone who's read a few Batman comics in my day, and I think those are some of the very best. What's this? Legends of the DC Universe, #1. In the late 90s, so this would have been February 98, shipped at the very end of 97 then, they decided to finally spin off Legends of the Dark Knight into a that format book for the rest of the DC Universe. So they started off with a 3-issue Superman story that's sort of out of continuity, I'm sure out of current continuity. James Robinson, who was just then riding high on Starman, and he'd sort of gotten a reputation as a second coming of Roy Thomas, as someone who was really, really into the Earth, well, what we would say the old Earth 2 batch of characters were, although at that point they were consolidated into the new Earth. Val Semix, who was the main Lobo penciler at the time, with Paul Neary on inks. And of course, the first thing that jumps out at you is the lettering by Janice Chiang. Just about my favorite. I was happy to see she's done a few books recently, too. And I think I want to say, because it said so on the title page here, that this was Ultra Humanite story. So yeah, that makes sense. You got James Robinson bringing a... and this takes place in the very early days of the post-crisis Superman, because you still got Lex Luthor with his receding red hairline, which he really only had for the Byrne Man of Steel storyline, because by the time they started up the regular Superman series post-crisis, he had already lost his hair. Seeing Lex Luthor with any kind of hair is just, kind of not right, not wholesome. Stay away from your brother. Yes, that's right. I see you. See what I have to put up with? What is this an ad for? MLB Players' Choice Products, electronic games, trading cards, pennants, action. Oh, so I guess this is baseball, just getting all of their licenses under one roof. Well, hello. You heard me yelling at your brother, so you decided to come and see how we're doing here. Well, you're not interfering, so you can. I guess you can sit there for these last few minutes. Yeah, so if you're a fan of James Robinson on Starman, if you're a fan of what James Robinson did with the Golden Age characters, this is probably one you wanna have in your collection. Covered by Glenn Orbeck. Later on they had some Gil Kane issues that are, what you should track down if you should track down anything. What's next? What do we got next in the pile? Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here's one for you. Iron Man #1 from Heroes Reborn. And we've gotten to the point where we've had some revisionism about the original Image books, and I'm part of that. I have a podcast about Top Cow, so I'm all about going back and seeing value in that stuff, especially now that all those fans have grown up and have the nostalgia. They look back and they try to find the good in those comics, and there's a lot of good in those comics. There's a lot of enthusiasm, even the ones that don't maybe hold up the best or are still fun to look at. But that wave of nostalgic enthusiasm hasn't quite made it to the Heroes Reborn era yet. But I was looking through this and thinking that a few of these comics at least didn't look terrible. This is Scott Lobdell and Jim Lee writing for Will Tasio on pencils and Scott Williams on ink. So that's very classic Image lineup. Lobdell had done a lot of work for Image, I think, by this time. But this is a nice looking book. I don't think a lot of people thought much at the time of some of the continuity they tried to do here, where they tried to have, if I'm remembering correctly, they tried to establish that Tony Stark and Reed Richards, Bruce Banner, and a couple other people had known each other in college, which in hindsight seems like the kind of retcon that was sort of ahead of its time. Yeah, speak of the devil, there's a picture of them. Tony Stark, Reed Richards, Victor Von Doom, Tony Stark, and some guy named Rebel, who I guess was a new character for the. I don't remember that. I bought this comic at the time. I obviously don't remember it very well. But in hindsight, that's the kind of thing that the Marvel Cinematic Universe would love to have. So it was really ahead of its time for all that. Bruce Banner, Happy Hogan, Liz Ross, Leonard Sampson, Lieutenant Commander Jasper Sitwell, Jennifer Walters. So here's all these Heroes Reborn versions, like Pepper Potts. Oh, she's throwing a drink in Tony Stark's face. That's something Pepper Potts is definitely going to be doing in any universe. The funny thing about those Iron Man movies is that Pepper Potts hadn't really appeared regularly in decades, and then suddenly she mattered again just because she was in a movie. And I didn't much care for that Madam Hydra revamp, reboot, whatever, however you want to call it. You can quibble with. Oh, hello. And here's what was going on in the rest of the line at the time. The Mike Deodato Jr. And Peter Milligan. Oh, are we in your way? Are we in your way? Oh, I need a Heroes Reborn cat. Well, we're almost done anyway. maybe this will be the last one. What I was going to say is, you know, Whilce Portacio, he definitely had his strengths. Sometimes his faces could be a little bit wonky, but his sense of page design was really next level, and you can see that. You know, he wasn't afraid to use a lot of negative space on the page. His definitely reads really well, even if, like I say, some of his faces could be a bit wonky. But the interesting thing about Heroes Reborn, and I've mentioned this before in other contexts, is that it was really a kick in the pants to Marvel in more ways than one, because it really was a blow. Hey, come on, let me finish what I'm doing here. Don't try to fight me. Ow. Wait 5 minutes. 5 minutes, honey. Because it was real demoralizing for the people who actually worked at Marvel proper to just have, you know, their crown jewels stolen out from under them, to be given to some people who had left the company a couple years ago. But at the same time, they took the opportunity to do some good books, because they suddenly had a hole in their editorial schedule, and that's the period where they gave the first issues of Thunderbolts. That's the first Thunderbolts book. First time Deadpool had his own book. Man, a couple more I'm missing. There was a really good run on Silver Surfer with James DeMatteis and Ron Garney that eventually had some J.J. Muth art on it. So they, like I say, they got a little bit of a kick in the pants, so to speak, from basically, you know, being told off by the market, like, oh, we're going to take Captain America and Fantastic Four away from you. What are you going to do about it? I don't know, maybe we'll launch Deadpool. And, you know, Deadpool didn't do that well at first. He was a low-selling cult title with, you know, critical acclaim, but not a lot of sales. They really tried to push the guy. People weren't having it. Little did they know. Someone knew. Someone at the company knew. I bought Daredevil. I bought Deadpool from the very beginning. I was happy they finally gave the guy his own book, because I had never given up hope. They waited the longest time to give him his own book, and then when they did, no one cared anymore. But I still cared. And the one big advance that the Heroes Reborn Hulk had was that he had long hair, and I think they've never tried to give the Hulk long hair again for some reason. They just was like, oh, we did that once, we're not doing that again. And he walked around naked a bunch. I remember that. But see, you can't say that this isn't a nice-looking comic book. This is a nice-looking comic book. If I were to sit down and actually read all the words on the page, maybe I wouldn't be quite so kindly disposed to it. But just flipping through it like this, yeah, this isn't terrible. I've read worse. I've seen worse. This wasn't a waste of my hard-earned money. Although I say that, and I flipped to X-Men, which was a book that I bought way longer than I needed to. Oh, Sliders. There you go. There's a show for you. Yeah, but this was $2.95 at the time. So. Oh goodness! Where are my bags? Do I need to open a new bag of bags? I think I need to open a new bag of bags. I got like one left. Here we go. New bag. There you go. A little bit dusty. All right, how are we on time? Oh, and we're good. We're good. We're at the hour here. All right, so we had fun. We looked at a few more comics than the last time. That's a good 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books. That's not so bad for an hour. That's not so bad for an hour's work. So we had fun. We had joy. We had Seasons in the Sun. That's not quite how that song goes, but it's close enough. So, you know, check out other videos I got. I've been putting up compilations of my TikTok videos with longer storylines on them. You can go check out the Udder Madness channel, which I guess is technically be the sister channel here, which is where I'm putting up video annotations for the Udder Madness podcast, which is me and Claire Napier talking all about Top Cow comics for sometimes well over an hour. Check out check out TikTok and Instagram. I'm on both of those. Twitter, Bluesky, all that jazz. I'm everywhere you want to look. And remember, if you want to give me money, go to my Patreon. I got a ton of stuff there to download. More stuff than you can shake a stick at. All right, well, I think I got to go play with the cat or he's going to tear the house down. So y'all take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.